Hey there, it's Mike from Office R&D and Jamie from Everything Coworking. We're excited to jump into episode 3 of our Flex Academy series, helping operators and landlords navigate the challenges of starting and managing a co-working business. Today's episode is focused primarily on opening a space for landlords, but if you're an operator, there will for sure be some interesting and helpful tips on how you can work closer with landlords to partner and build a strong business relationship. There are many different ways that landlords can work with flexible operators, and we're going to take a quick look at some of the main options and why a landlord might choose each route. And with that, Jamie, take us away.
Mike, it's great to be back doing
Yep.
video number 3. If you missed the first two, definitely go back and watch them. Okay, so the first thing I would say about landlords deciding to self-operate or select an operator is we'll go with the partnership idea first, and then we'll talk about what it might look like to self-operate.
Yep.
Because a lot of landlords will choose to partner. Is that no two agreements are ever the same between a landlord and an operator. So any agreement is really around what's important to each party and whether or not those like kind of needs and objectives and goals sort of fit at that time and place. So you're sort of starting from scratch when you're negotiating. But Mike, you're going to talk about one of the sort of more common approaches to an agreement that we might see between a landlord and an operator.
Yeah, I'll start with the one that probably you hear about the most in the industry. And from what I understand, this originally came from the hotel industry. They've been doing this method for quite a while, and it's starting to become more normal within the co-working industry. And that's called a management agreement. And a management agreement is a legal document that lays out the terms and conditions of the relationship between a landlord and the co-working operator. Generally, in the terms of a management agreement, the landlord will pay for the build out and the expenses and even a management fee. And the operator will have a profit share with that landlord until the portion of the build out has been paid. So in many cases, it's a good scenario for both parties because as an operator, it's low risk because you are not having to spend all this capital to build out your space. And from a landlord's perspective, it can be low risk as well because sure, you do have to pay the upfront cost to get the space opened, but you are not actually managing the space yourself. And a lot of the headache that comes with sometimes opening and managing a co-working space, you don't have to worry about. Another benefit of it is it can help prevent misunderstandings between the operator and the landlord. It can clarify each party's responsibilities from an operations standpoint, as well as like from a legal standpoint. So who's in charge of maintenance and repairs? If the toilet's broken, who ultimately is responsible for fixing that? And yeah, I mean, if you are thinking about working with an operator, make sure that you get legal advice. There are lawyers that can help put together management agreements and are more familiar with it. And that really helps protect both parties as they get into running the space. So yeah, that's a little bit about a management agreement and the partnership between the operator and the the operator and the landlord.
Yeah. So Michael, the management agreement is a great, sort of common example. Again, there are so many different ways to structure agreements. So it's important to just remember, do what works for both parties. Sometimes there's a base lease involved, which might be important for a lender who needs to see a lease on the books. That's a way also maybe the landlord pays for the build out in that case, but there's a base lease that gets the landlord some, sort of base level of income, and then maybe there's a profit share so that, again, incentives are aligned, but it gives the operator time to ramp up. One of the big benefits for the operator in these examples are that they don't have to come to the table with all of the capital for the build out. And because both parties have aligned incentives, the operator gets some time to ramp up occupancy, which we know is one of the challenges of this business model. But if the landlord is really excited about either offering this as an amenity or the upside over time, maybe a premium to market rent, then these creative structures can really make sense. So the important thing is really just, to keep in mind, align incentives between the operator and the landlord. We want the operator to be incentivized to perform as well as possible. and again, you mentioned this, have a really detailed operating agreement in place that specifies who's paying for what are the reporting requirements, and then what happens if there's a breakup, which we don't want to see happen,
Yep,
but you
but it
need to
happens.
account
It
for.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that really takes us really nicely into our next slide, talking about the relationship between the landlord and the operator. It's Jamie, and this is your quote, but you say it's not an arm's length relationship. It really is a true partnership between the two parties, both sharing responsibilities and even reporting requirements. As a landlord, it's your job to understand the health of the co-working business. And there's different metrics that you really need to keep track of than like a traditional lease. Some things that landlords generally look from operators are things like tours booked, sales and opportunity information, monthly revenue from the space, occupancy percentages, maybe even things like the average customer length of the stay or average customer lifetime value. These are all KPIs that are also very important for you as or for operators, but landlords generally like to understand these to really keep a pulse on the business. And really, all of these stats can help the landlords further understand the partnership and then take action if things are not going according to plan. And conversely, for those operators listening, you should be able to easily provide all of this information at regular intervals. That's so important. Whatever tool or software or reporting you're using, you need to be able to quickly and easily generate this for your landlord partner, so that they can look around in it and again, just make better decisions about the business going forward. So yeah, that's a little bit about kind of the relationship from the reporting standpoint that we see a lot of times with operators and landlords.
Yeah, and Michael, you said you got to have this data. You have to be sort of have enough experience operating that you have systems in place, you have reporting mechanisms in place. You're not sort of, running the business on paper.
Yep.
You really want to be able to
Or an Excel.
deliver, yeah. I know I was going to say our spreadsheets. Certainly spreadsheets can be professional, but
And
you
it,
want to
it
make sure
can be
you
done. I've seen people do it, but it's a stressful environment for all those involved.
Yeah, and I think, by that we mean systems like, professional accounting systems like QuickBooks,
Yep.
customer relationship management systems versus like Post-it notes and right, Google Sheets.
Yep.
You really want to have those things in place so that you can easily pull reporting and also so that you can access and act on the metrics, Michael, that you mentioned. So if you're a landlord and you're evaluating a potential partner, we could certainly do a deep dive on any of these topics we're bringing up and, talk for hours about them. But you really want to, make sure they're qualified, that they've operated successful locations
Yep.
for some time, that they haven't just started, a location and they think everything's great. You want to see them having been through some challenges and overcome them. Again, you want to make sure they have well documented systems. When you ask them, like, what is your, how do you get customers?
Yeah.
You want them to talk about their customer acquisition approach and how that works and what levers they pull. And then you should, you don't have to like them a lot, but you should have a decent working
Yeah.
relationship with them because, Michael, you made the point, like it's more than just that lease relationship where you sign the lease and then you only hear from the tenant, if the elevator's broken, you will meet with them probably once a month, maybe
Yep.
a little bit more often, at the beginning to understand how the business is doing and to talk through challenges. So you want to have a good working relationship and kind of like collaborating with them.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
and I think what's a saying like rising tide lifts all boats. What I mean
yeah.
by that is, having a successful and a thriving co-working space in your building is obviously going to attract more people than just co-working people to your building. I mean, it increases the perception and the value and the vibe of your building as a whole, having that lobby or space that you can walk into that's beautifully managed by a co-working operator. So there really is a whole lot of value in working with an established operator that knows how to do it and can bring those kind of results to your business. Um, so with that, again, working with an operator is great, but at the same time, we have seen some landlords and owners that actually decide to operate themselves. And many times this happens when owners have some sort of portfolio or multiple buildings that they're managing, and they want to build like a flex brand inside their group of buildings. In that case, it makes sense to potentially do it yourself. You don't have to worry about paying management fees or splitting profits. And at the end of the day, you have complete control over the business, which can be really good because you can do things your way and the way that you've done them before. That might not always lead to the best outcomes if you're talking about a different type of business that is co-working. But, as long as you're talking to people about it and understand what you're getting into, we have seen some successful landlords that have kind of self-operated.
Yeah, certainly a lot of institutional owners
Yes.
are taking this on. Tishman Speyer, Heinz has their own brand. And to your point, they have a large portfolio. I just started working with a group that has multiple locations. They've experimented with Flex a little bit. They really want to take it on themselves, but they're getting some, professional support to make
Yeah.
sure that they,
Which is a good way to do it.
are. Yeah, exactly. Because the challenges of self-operating, you need to understand. I think the model looks really easy to reverse engineer, which we've talked about a little bit in our other videos. But there's a lot that goes into the design. We're going to talk in our next video about product mix. What do you build in the space? How big are your offices? How big are your meeting rooms? What goes where? And then there's all the back end operations. How do you bill? All the KPIs that you have to keep track
A
of,
lot of stuff.
customer acquisition. I know it looks like a simple model, but it's really a pretty heavy lift in terms of operations and marketing. It's not a sort of set it and forget it business. It's definitely not, we'll sign this and come back in 5 years. So you have to really want to do it and want to build that competency on your team. And you can learn it. Obviously, lots of folks learn how to do it. You just have to really want to take on the complexity of the operations and the marketing, et cetera.
No, no, you're really completely right. Yeah, and truly, we're excited to see more and more landlords jump into the industry. But as Jamie said, remember, Flex is a different product than the traditional office that as a landlord you might have sold before. Flex needs to be looked at with a different lens, and it's much more hands-on than the classic office product that many landlords have been selling for the past 50 years, and just requires some more effort. But yeah, with all that being said, thank you guys all so much for joining us today. Our next episode, as Jamie mentioned, is going to be focused on picking your flexible office product mix. And we're really excited to jump into it on the next one. Thank you guys for joining today and have a great one.